excellent teachings that we find here, because they are actually the core of Mahayana teaching, late Indian Buddhism that was transferred from India into Tibet. And luckily it was done, because otherwise Buddhism, so to say, would not have survived, because of, in India at the time, Islamic invasions that starting to take place from Mongolia and from Central Asia. And so Buddhism was on the brink of extinction. But luckily, the Tibetans had uproar themselves. And this is what I would like to do with you today. I would like to take you back on a journey 1,000 years ago and let you know what was happening there in order to understand what you actually see here. Background for this being why I start here is the external world next to the interior world that we have here in Tabo. You would start, if you come back again, or if I weren't there, you would start with the entrance corridor, where we have introductory panels on the region. You find a map, and on the idea behind the monastery. You also find these things on panels which are pasted onto these pillars there. You can read them, you cannot read them, it doesn't matter. You can also be just fascinated and looking at the paintings. This is what I did when I started out there. I didn't understand a single thing when I was in there. I was just fascinated by the amazing color, by the amazing style of these images, by the finesse of the painting, which is unmatched, at least to my taste, in Tibetan art history. And the reason for that being is because we actually have Indian art here. This is late 10th, mid 11th century Kashmiri art. And the Kashmiris were some of the, there was a big center of Buddhism in Kashmir at the time. There were two centers actually. One was in Kashmir and the other one was in the east of India, what is now Bihar in India. And you probably have heard of the great University of Nalanda, which is in the eastern part of India. And the background for this monastery is that the kings of central Tibet were deprived of their throne because in the 8th century, Tibet had become Buddhist in the first transmission of the Dharma, so to say. And there were a lot of tantric magical things going on, with Padmasambhava being the one who brought Buddhism to Tibet. And the discipline of the monks, tended to be very loose. And so with every population that is turned into a different culture, into a different religion, there are always doubts about what is coming to them newly. So it took around, despite great monasteries being built, like Samye Monastery in central Tibet, close to Lhasa, it came to a lot of uproar and turmoil. And so the kings of central Tibet were expelled from the throne, and the former pre-Buddhist rites were again preached and practiced, which were animist, natural rites, sacrificing to the wind, sacrificing to the natural forces. What Tibetan Buddhism tried to incorporate into its pantheon, but was only partly successful because of monks' attitudes, so to say. So the kings had to leave the country, and they united with former allies that they had when central Tibet was a huge, huge empire that transcended into Central Asia, into borderlands of Iran even. So a huge empire, a lot of things on the Silk Road. Dunhuang was a part of central Tibet, and the Himalayan states were, and everything like that was lost. But the Tibetan kings never forgot that they were the actual rulers of Tibet. And what they tried then, they went to Western Tibet, which at the time was the home of certain clans they were united with, and started to rebuild their kingdom there. They didn't attempt to invade central Tibet. They were too weak for that. They didn't have many armies. They gradually enlarged their kingdom by marriage with those clans. And, they built certain centers like Toling was their capital. And every expansion of the kingdom was, good evening, hello, was always manifested with the building of a monastery. One was Toling, which was the center. Tabo was another one. Korchak, which is on the Nepalese border, was another one. And Nyarma was the last one. And Alchi in Ladakh, which is now Ladakh. But those regions didn't exist then. It was all the Guge kingdom. And Guge means scripture. And that is very important because the king of Western Tibet said, I would like to go back to Mahayana Buddhism and go to the scriptures, not all this magical stuff and what has nothing to do with Buddhism, but try to get to the core of things again. It's not the original Buddhism that we know, like Siddhartha walking and telling people to strive for enlightenment. It was the Mahayana ideals already, where we're all doing things for each other, and the enlightenment can only be possible if everybody is being enlightened. So the more advanced or widened ideas of Buddhism. And for that, Kashmir was a great center. So the king of Western Tibet sent out various scholars to go to Kashmir, which was a month-long ride through, I don't know if you saw them before, those landscapes of barrenness, high altitude mountains, mountain deserts, into Kashmir, where they were confronted again with difficult climate, tropics, Indian plainlands. For us, Kashmir is like Bavaria in Germany a little bit, where I don't come from there, but I come from Frankfurt in Germany, and we go there for holidays. So it's like an alpine climate, but for Tibetans, it used to be, infectious and difficult. But one of these people survived. His name was Rinchen Zangpo. He became the great translator in Tibetan tradition. And he fervently studied scriptures. He got introduced into them. He got initiated into them. And then with the help of Kashmiri scholars, he translated them into Tibetan, because that was his task, why the king was sending him out, to get true knowledge back to Tibet. And the king himself turned to be a monk. He said, I have to be an example for the people. And I want the people to turn to this religion, because I think it's higher knowledge. It's something Mahayana ideal. We have to get people attracted to it. We have to make people understand and help them on the way towards a higher self, towards enlightenment. So naturally, these Mahayana ideals were with them. And what was great about it was that the monasteries that with royal patronage were built had this exceedingly rich artwork in them. Maybe you saw in the beginning there were these clay adobe buildings. That's Tabo Monastery. You will see it also on the outside in the corridor. It's very insignificant buildings, cubic buildings, not even painted. We don't know if it was painted originally. Now they're not. Just brown paintings. And that connected with the landscape that you find there, those brown, amazing rocks, 7,000-meter high mountains, and the rest being blue sky, maybe patches of green where barley is grown. And then you go into a temple like this, you open it up, and this, falls onto you. This paradise, that's what they strove for, making the people understand what actually is the true nature of the world. All this hardship that we're facing, it's actually not reality. It's what we make out of it. And they try to portray what is the real meaning or the real essence of the world. And for this, they were relying on Tibetan, on Buddhist scriptures, one of which was a scripture that was written in the 8th century already in southern India, so quite far away, but was Buddhist at the time. India was Buddhist at the time. And so that was translated, and I will show that to you right now if you follow me towards this part of the exhibition. This is the original sculpture or statue of Tabo Monastery. It used to be just a single small shrine with this Buddha being a bit higher, a bit larger than life, being seated into a niche, and two figures flanking him, which we don't see here. This exhibition actually is a tailor-made exhibition for the Tibet House. And so, you know, certain parts could certainly not be shown here, but that's why I said we try to have the core of the concepts shown here. And you have to imagine that this figure was originally white in color. The red color is a later addition. Why? Because Tibetan Buddhism had developed from what we saw 1,000 years ago. And this figure is seated what is now the west of the temple. And the west normally, according to later and also to the original scriptures, is the paradise of Amitabha, the Buddha of boundless light. However, also the gesture, which is a meditative gesture, fits this interpretation. But we know now that there is a scripture on a white Buddha in meditative gesture, which fits much better the whole concept of Tabo. The white color in this original concept was supposed to be the color that contains everything. This is the ultimate truth, so to say. If we have with modern words and we take the authority of Tibetan Buddhism, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he is famous for his saying that he's dying 10 times a day. That means that in meditation, he willingly leaves his body and reaches enlightenment in the sense that he consciously is able to ascend and to step into an altered state of consciousness by which everything is understood. You have to believe it, but that's what he says. And he says that every one of us should concern himself, herself, with the nature of consciousness. And if we look at physical physics and research on these things, we come across a lot of ideas that the rest, or what cannot be grasped anymore, is light. And we have a lot of depictions also in medieval art in Europe, Hieronymus Bosch, where the angels take the soul through the tunnel into the white light. And the Tibetan Buddhists have the same thing, saying that in the end, when you die, you will see the white light. And not many of us are able to unite with this white light, with this all overall encompassing consciousness, because our fears, our passions, our will to have like a personality and have individuality is too strong. And we're not ready yet to merge with the overall consciousness. This is the idea behind this figure. And later on, you will see a figure where this can be grasped even more. Just consider this figure being white and thinking the world, creating the world. This is the meditation. In meditation, he thinks and creates the world in his mind, because this is Buddhist view of the mind, of the world. Everything we see, everything we perceive, we make up in our mind. And it's changeable. It's not permanent. It will, if our mindset is different, we will see the world differently. And it's wonderfully shown here with these acolytes being around him. Those two have already appeared from the cosmos, and those two are still there appearing. So he's thinking them, he's making them, he's creating them. And this all-encompassing creator in Sanskrit is called Vairochana or Vairochana. It means the all-pervading light, the white light that goes through everything. And actually, the idea is that this is our true self as people. We all have this light in us. We all have this all-pervading consciousness in us. We all are actually one aspect of the consciousness that combines everything and is in this world everywhere, in all beings, be it animals to a certain degree, to human beings. That goes back now to the wheel of life. Who is able to understand this? Who is able to break out of this circle of birth and rebirth? So everything of this is already there 1,000 years ago, even more, because we say 8th century, this was already brought up with. So we have a shrine where you have him and 2 bodhisattva figures. So a threefold division, so to say. And we have those figures coming out, and the 2 bodhisattvas attending him are also aspects of him. So a threefoldness of the world. How is this white light, this all-encompassing consciousness, materializing itself? How has it formed the world? And if we're part of it, and if it's the consciousness is there in the world, it must have materialized it somehow. We have a body, and inside of this body is this consciousness. So these 2 bodhisattvas, which we don't see here, but you see in the catalog, in the book, they stand for this evolution, so to say, for this cosmic evolution. This was 996 Common Era, and was conceived by Rinchen Zangpo, the great translator. Then, 50 years later, we find an inscription in Tabo that states, the nephew of the Bodhisattva, which was Yeshe-Ö, the king of Western Tibet, the nephew is Changchup-Ö, found that the temple had grown old. Like the way they put it is not very clear, but it goes on, the inscription saying, so they thought they would have to do something new about it. And this is where all this comes in now. Before, it was just a shrine with three figures and maybe something around it which is not there anymore. However, then all of this was built in addition. And the reason for that being because Rinchen Zangpo in the meantime had translated yet another text which focused on the all-encompassing consciousness in the world. And that he translated and made available because that would make the access to that consciousness easier for the people. So it has a motivational and a pedagogic aspect why this monastery was built, in the sense that we have to give people a chance to understand what is going on. And if they want to leave the ever-present and painful cycle of birth and rebirth, we have to give them the means to do that. It's not only that they say, yeah, that's the way it is. We all have this consciousness. So how should we go about that? Should we develop ourselves? Should we become better people? Should we become spiritual people, just only spirit and not body anymore? How should we go about with that? So this new concept that he had divides the formerly only 3 aspects into 37. And when you look at Tibetan Buddhism, how it continued, and mind you, it's always Indian sources for that. When you look at the Kala Chakra Mandala, maybe you are familiar with that, there we have a division into 1100 aspects. It's the same thing. It's just getting more and more psychologically oriented, dividing the human mind into aspects which we all have. Like, just think of yourself, how many thoughts you have every day, or when you go to sleep, what comes to your mind? What is your personality? What is affecting you? What are you thinking about? And the effort is to try to put all this into a conscious understanding, because enlightenment means that nothing is left out. And that is what makes it so difficult, because they don't say no to anything. Like, if we have drives, we have to work with that. We have to see if we can, transcend them in order to reach higher grounds or whatever. Yeah? It's never, no, we don't think about that. So the problem I have with 1100 deities is that it's just too much, Then I've become a firm believer of reincarnation, because I'm not going to work on this and do this in one lifetime. It takes like whatever, hundreds to do this. But for this, that's why we had a discussion today about attraction in the world. What are we attracted to? And this attracted me first because of the art, because it's beautiful. and this is the thing that Rinchen Zangpo and the kings of Western Tibet also thought of, we have to make something to attract the people, you know, and they had royal patronage, so they could afford the Kashmiri artists coming from Kashmir on a month-long journey being paid for their craft next to the scholars and decorate the temples, the interiors with that philosophy that Rinchen Zangpo discovered as to be a better means in order to reach enlightenment. The Vajradhatu Mandala is the name of this scripture. It's the diamond world, the adamantine sphere, so to say, the true essence of life. What is beyond our illusions, so to say. And this is divided into 37 aspects. In Tabo, it's 33 actually, because they leave out 4, because they're still in the position to say this all-encompassing light cannot be divided. There's a later stage where they said, well, maybe they said, no, we're not taking those 4 around him because that is ultimate truth that cannot be divided. So we'll look now at how this is divided. If I had a presentation here on a computer, I could show you the mandala, but you can see all that in the book also. It's very simple, actually. You have the white light in the middle, and then you have the colors, the main colors, red, yellow, green, and blue around it. And then those colors are surrounded by another 4 each. And then you have an outside circle with offering deities that either offer to the outside or offer to the inside. So that's quite simple. We don't have to, let down the screen in order to show you that. But you can see that also in the book. So if you would follow me to that wall, which starts actually here with this also, which is the cover image or the image of the exhibition, there you can see that these are actually, that's why I used, that's why I wanted this to be presented here, because what you see here in the central register of this wall are 3-dimensional sculptures that are placed against the wall. And the idea is to create an illusionary environment in which 3-dimensional representations and 2-dimensional representations merge into one. Because the whole system, the whole idea is that everything that we see is an illusion. And it gives credit to that idea by creating illusionary aspects of a room design, so to say. So the central part here is the means of attaining enlightenment. Please imagine this is countered by another wall, which we don't have here in the exhibition because of the window wall. And this is the southern wall of the temple of Palace of Excellent Teachings. And this is the actual way it looks when you go into Tabo. You find those lotus thrones right on head level, and you are seated as a monk below. You can see that in the film that I was able to shoot there. And the idea is that, or how people went about with this mandala is that there's a lama, a spiritual advisor, so to say, who initiates the adept into a certain aspect of that mandala. It starts with protective deities, which are also not shown here, and as I said, the offering deities that create the right attitude, the right spirit to get into this mood or into this strive for perfection, for enlightenment. Protection against outward influences, but also offering myself, so to say, my personality to a higher cause, by which these deities help me with. We're in India, so they offer incense, they offer food, they offer drink or whatever, the perfume is there. So all of which is supposed to create a great mood for doing this thing. It's always not stressful, but always nice to be done. So then, like for example, somebody would say, your personality matches this one. Why? How can you go about with that? Because there's a scripture that says, you have to think that this is a vision of somebody who was meditating on that and supposedly reached enlightenment. And what he saw on his path towards enlightenment is this 37 different aspects of his personality. And that's the idea behind it. And he passes on this teaching or this experience by teaching and writing it down. And since he is an enlightened being, he can identify what these deities, these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas actually mean. And the meaning is manifold. Like, it's very difficult to speak about mystical knowledge because it's just overwhelming to everybody. And then somebody trying to get an understanding of aspects of it in order for regular people to understand it, it will never be able to touch what is actually the real meaning behind it. But in the scripture, we find certain aspects which an initiated person would understand and identify with. So let's, for example, say this very dynamic figure here would be representing somebody who has a lot of action in his mind, which actually is true because, no, actually it's not, if it would be here. This is the action family, so to say. Akshobhya, the blue Buddha in the middle, we can identify the Buddhas, the cosmic Buddhas, which are the first manifestations of the all-encompassing light, the white one on with the red halos. So this is a cosmic Buddha, and the yellow one or golden one is a cosmic Buddha. This one is Akshobhya. This one is Ratnasambhava. You probably are familiar with the 5 Buddhas, Vairochana, Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha, and Amoghasiddhi. Those 5, they are always, we have caps outside in the closets, so the lamas wear them. They're very essential for Tibetan Buddhism. But they are again surrounded by these bodhisattvas around them. So they again have aspects of these Buddhas there. So as I was saying, maybe there's a very dynamic person, a person that is very active normally. Maybe, I'm not sure if I'm correct, but maybe the Lama would tell him, meditate about him and see what your activity means, how it can be used for attaining enlightenment, like that. So a very, very a way to go about with the talents a person brings with him, because we have so many of them. There are other ones which are much more laid back or relaxed in the meditative gesture. The Amitabha section is a section of meditation, and maybe somebody who is very, very much in a meditative state, or somebody who is very calm, maybe he would be attracted to this one and say, this is a lot of action which I don't have. So I don't know, it goes like this. What is amazing about these sculptures, however, is that they are floating. They are not seated on their lotus thrones. If you look at that, this is the lotus throne, and this is the figure. It's raised upwards, it's floating, it's flying, it's, you know, ascending from the ground. If it's not that way, then the figure had either fallen off and was attached to the wall again. It is not the original thing. You can see how many reparations were done, how many renovations were done, by the way, how different these figures are. I think, you know, some of the best preserved ones are those 2 on the outside here, where you can really see well that this is like the lotus blossom, and the blossom leaves outside, the pistils are here. And then this is the dhoti, the cloth of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, and this is ascending. And this is the way how this figure is attached to the lotus throne. Technically, it's done with rods into the wall, but this way, it shows that it's floating upwards. A thing that we find again in the paintings there also. So that means that not any superpowers can be generated from this mandala, but it shows that it's a sort of limbo state. It's in between. It's not, you know, fast on the ground. It's not in the sky, but it can be that somebody will be floating to higher states of consciousness, so to say. So evolution now not in 3 parts, but in 5 parts, again divided into various sections. Every Buddha, every cosmic Buddha has 4 bodhisattvas next to it, aiding him, explaining more of the cosmic truth and knowledge that they contain. Something which, by the way, was never preached by the historic Buddha, but what was put onto him, he must have had that cosmic knowledge, because cosmic knowledge means enlightenment. So this is how Mahayana Buddhism evolved, because people were searching for the truth. The Buddha never gave an advice on a technique on how to sit down. He just said, relax and it will come. But we human beings are sometimes not content with anybody telling us to lay back and be cool about things. It will come. We want to strive ourselves and do the things ourselves. So this is where Mahayana Buddhism stepped in and gave the people the possibility to do these things. In order to be motivated, because remember, it's 37 aspects with multifaceted aspects to understand and to internalize and become the Buddha yourself, or the Bodhisattva yourself. This is the visual meditation forms that is so prevalent in Tibetan Buddhism. You imagine a deity in all its forms, in the color, in the placement, in the mandala, in the attributes, in the gesture, everything. And through that, you understand it. But through that, you also realize how illusionary it is. And that is a core aspect of this meditation, of any Tibetan Buddhist meditation. It is a vehicle. It is a vehicle towards something which is beyond that. This is not the truth. And this is what I love the most about this place. This is all not there, actually. Yeah? Somebody took great care and make the best and most beautiful statues, sculptures, and paintings that they could at the time, only to express that it's all illusion and it's all not there. In comparison with the all-encompassing truth. And I would ask you now, after trying to let you know what this means, show you the all-encompassing truth, how it developed from this one, which is red now, to the central deity of the mandala here in the back. Maybe I stand here, then you can see me. This is Sarvavit Vairochana, or Mahavairochana, the fourfold figure of Vairochana, the all-encompassing light. Again, put into a more accessible figure, because we have 4 figures of him now. Sometimes he's also depicted with 4 heads, looking in the cardinal direction, so being present everywhere. This is the symbolic meaning of it. Next to it, he's white in color. The gilding has been done when the mandala was reinstated, reinstalled by His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a sign of reference and reverence to it, and to make it come alive again. But it's white in color. And I have a photograph from 1995, I think, where also the face was white or silver. The other reason why he means what I was just telling is the Tibetan art works with a lot of iconography in order to submit its messages. The way the hands are held. This is the Dharma Chakra mudra. Dharma Chakra means the wheel of law, which means actually setting the cosmos in motion. Because when the saying goes that when the historic Buddha got enlightened, he understood how the world works. And he was the person to understand it. And he knew that his mind was what made the world go round. So the problem was to step out of this himself creating the world, like Vairochana. So that's why we say the historic Buddha Shakyamuni is the one where this goes back to, because he was I mean, they created, we'll see in a minute, historic Buddhas also, and you know the Jataka tales, so there were some beings before the historic Buddha that already contained that knowledge. That's typical Mahayana belief. But the essence of it is there. The Dharma Chakra Mudra, meaning sometimes he's portrayed with a wheel also, but just this preaching also and thinking. And there's also, which we are not sure about, if it really is the Dharma Chakra Mudra, because there's a different mudra also for this figure, which is called the Father-Mother, the Vajrayana mudra, where the right hand holds the left index finger as a sign of the unification of the dualities. Because all this, what we are thinking, what we see, is always in duality. If this is a light color, this is a black color, a dark color. If you are female, then I'm male, or whatever. It's the differences between the world. But in the all-encompassing truth, there are no differences anymore. So that's why he's also depicted like that, or with, you know, for the adept, so to say, look, you are starting this. You are the one who creates the illusions. Step out of it. I, on purpose, you know, arranged it like this because I've never seen an exhibition where a photograph is shown, except for the Campbell concerts by what's his name, the Andy Warhol, right? So what I wanted to do is, you know, also have this illusion shown here. We have 4 times, it's not the same image, but it's the same figure, but it's different angles of him. Like this would be taken from the northwest. This would be, you see this face there in the front. This would be the side there. There would be that side there, but going around. And the people walk around it and encircle it. And this one would be from the west side, right? So only, and I like the side views better. By the way, people always ask what this big guy here is, and this probably is either Atisha or Rinchen Zangpo that was placed on the altar later as a reference to who thought up these things there. Yeah. And then there's a stupa there where some High Lama was cremated, and the rest, the remains were put in there. We also have more hints towards his meaning, which are the stupas on top, Kashmiri rendered stupas in Kashmiri style with a small bumpa and a large, huge umbrella on top. And on the top of the whole arrangement, we find these grotesque faces. These are called kirtimukhas. Kirtimukhas are glorious faces. And what they exude is pearls, strings of pearls. And this means this is like the benefit of all this. So endless wealth, endless beauty, endless comfort that is coming out of their mouth, so to say. It was a way of expressing it at the time. So this is the center of the mandala from which everything, you know, comes, and from which everything is created. And you have to understand it also in the 3-dimensional sense, which they don't follow here now, but they make those row-like arrangements. We have, it's the same system, by the way, like the Borobudur Stupa in Java, where you have a mountain ascent mandala with, you know, the parts on the lower part, and then ascending, and the last station, so to say, the last part is Vairochana on the top. We have to wander again. Please come follow me back to this one here, because now we change the subject. What's very interesting, I mentioned the Borobudur Stupa, which is an 8th century building. It follows the same concept, the same compendium of principles, which is the background text for it. There you have it again. It's a principle. Those figures are no three-dimensional manifestations in a physical form. These are principles by which the universe works and by which we make up the universe. And so compendium principles would be like 37 chapters explaining these figures there. What is also equivalent to the Borobudur Stupa are those two continuous narrative friezes that are in Tabo, as in the Borobudur Stupa, where they are chiseled out of granite. Here they are painted. This is the story of the merchant's son, the legend of the merchant's son. His name is Sudhana. Sudhana was a person in Tibetan, he's called Norzang. Norzang is a figure that finds reference in the Achilamo, the Tibetan opera, where they go back to him, because what he does is he goes to 53 different teachers and tries to find initiation into the Vajradhatu Mandala. So naturally they used him as a great motivation for the monks to try to follow his footsteps. And in the end, he merges, there's a painting there which is on another wall, he merges with Vairochana and becomes him, and that's a sign of his enlightenment. And there's also a beautiful image of him being touched on the forehead by a hand that comes out of a cloud, like a medieval European manuscript painting. And there we can see all the different, it's like a comic strip. There he enters the house, there he gets initiated, and then he says goodbye, leaves, and goes to these sadhus here, those ascetics, and gets taught by them, climbs the mountain, goes back in. Here we have some monkeys, goes to this palace. Then we have some nuns where he's being taught. And all this is the great thing. Everything is described here in so-called cartouches, where inscriptions are found. And the wonderful thing, this is always, when I start talking about that, the wonderful thing is regarding technical aspects, I was able to do this documentation with a high resolution camera by the name of Phase One. We had it in this afternoon, we had a workshop together and a small lecture about it. And with a regular camera, you wouldn't be able to read these inscriptions there. So from a scientific point of view, it's also very good for scientists to have these images and study them there. They don't have to go to this very dark monastery and look with a torch and try to figure out what is there to read, which is, again, from a conservation point of view, difficult for the paintings. So like in medieval churches, like people, but more advanced, because in medieval churches we had the crossway where people came and followed and saw the pain and the passion of Jesus until the crucifixion by pictures. Here we have the same thing, but for the monks to be read, because you have to imagine in Tibetan society, the monks were the ones and the nuns that were supposed to learn reading and writing, whereas the others were just servants, which is not the case totally in that monastery. If you look at the film, you will see, and we talked about that before, these are adobe clay buildings built on village ground. It's not like those later monasteries, Potala being a great example, or other ones that are on monolith mountains and far away from the public. Because at the time, Rinchen Zangpo and Yeshe said, we have to attract people to this. We have to make it accessible to them. And not only by making a system available by which maybe some of these ideas could be, got across or understood, but also by making this monastery accessible. And whenever I worked there, I was amazed how many people actually enter the temple and touch the images and try to get blessings, because in regular monasteries it's not like that. You go to a monastery on top of the mountains and it's the refuge or the place of the monks, and not many regular people go there. Here was different because it's on village level, and the king had to try to get people attracted to the Buddhist way of life, that means becoming a monk and, not being in a family anymore, which was difficult, but eventually then he succeeded, and the society changed in that way. So this is certainly a means for people to be motivated, and also for them to read legendary stories to the people that come into the temple. And the third part of the threefold wall segments is the cosmos up there. So motivation, means, and goal or aim, something like that. Because those triads are the cardinal, ordinal directions and the directions in between top and bottom, which is typical from Hindu philosophy, where we have the planets and also the directions of the sky. This is also here in Buddhism. And this is, again, a good example why we only have principles visible here, not Buddhas that are certain actual figures or historic personages. This is a principle of truth that pervades the cosmos. And he is depicted in a different way. He has the hand like that. He has the Dharma Chakra mudra. This one has the gesture of giving. So all these principles are present in the cosmos and are watched over by bodhisattvas. So there's a connection, a bodhisattva being a being that is on the way to enlightenment. So even in the cosmos, this principle that this enlightenment can be attained is present. And like I said, this is also on another wall, and there's walls in between. And the last thing that I want to, last thing we have also in the exhibition is what I want to get into with you is this huge and long wall that we have here. So if you would place yourself in the middle, then I think you can see best what we got there. When we conceived this exhibition, or when I conceived those exhibitions, because like after Alchi, which was here for 2 years, this is the second one. My idea had always been that there, like this monastery shows it, there are so many ways of how to become attracted to a certain subject. And one of the subjects, of course, was also the technical aspect, the photography aspect. And people are always amazed by the quality of the representations here. And the nicest story in that regard, I have it by a very nice elderly lady when I had an exhibition like that in Hamburg, in a quite renowned museum. And the lady came up to me after a guided tour and said, "Young man, that's all very nice with all these artworks, but you're bringing those artworks back to the Himalayas when this exhibition's finished, right?" So she really thought I was like the old great German explorers hacking out these paintings from walls in the Silk Road or wherever they got hold of them and took them to Hamburg and show them there. No, it's not like that. It's this high resolution camera that in the original makes photographs which are that high, 1.5 meters times 1 meter in 300 dpi, which means printing resolution. That means you can print a book in 1.5 meters height, size. And so to get this image, we had to enlarge it only once. That's why the quality is like that. Let's just look at this inscription there. It's just really great to read. The trouble was only that all these images that you see here, you have to think of them as a cube. This is the southern wall that goes onto these Buddhas. This is the west wall, which is like the main wall. And then comes the northern wall there, which we had to cut because the room wasn't big enough for that. And you walk around this Vairochana Buddha, the first one that we discussed, in your ambulation of the temple, and the pilgrims go around it. And these are located on the outer walls of this ambulatory path. And the problem is the ambulatory path is only that wide. So how to take photographs of images which are life-size here, like this. So it's possible. It was never possible before, but this camera had the possibility of, you have to imagine it like a sled. You can move the whole back and the lens by not having to change your tripod. And that way, in that very narrow path, I could do like those two together on one, later to be merged together image. And then I had to step on ladders and do the same thing up there. And the trouble was that you could only do that with a really wide angle, like almost like a fisheye. And anybody of you, everybody who has ever photographed with such wide angles, he knows that it looks great, but if you want to stitch those images together afterwards, there's no way you can do it because the angles are just like this. It's all very, wide and shining like that, but we wanted to have the whole iconographic program here. So it took me 9 months of post-production to get these images back together and try to merge them with each other. And the trouble was that it's not just like this, but we always have these nice flowers in between. Those have to be got together. So I was very grateful for this camera because it took a lot of, compressing images at the same time. It's not straight at all. So sometimes this line was up here and this other one was there, and I had to get it together. And the resolution of this camera allowed all these things. You could not do that with a regular SLR 30 megapixel camera, because then you would lose detail, it would be blurry and things. So although it took me that long, for the first time ever, I've been traveling to Tabo for 35 years. I'm finally content with the result because this is the actual colors. You can see wherever there had been damages, wherever it's been demolished, where water has been leaking in. This is the kind of work that I'm doing also. I'm not retouching images to make them more beautiful, but I want them to be accurate and to be realistic. And because the art deserves that. I mean, you don't have to do anything about these images to make them more beautiful than they are already, right? It's only that the trouble is that some of them have been repainted by people that were not capable of doing it the way the Kashmiri painters were doing it in the 11th century, or they have been damaged or washed away, or the colors had reacted with air and the colors have changed. So we're all striving at renovating this place, which is a difficult problem because it's under Archaeological Survey of India, and that they control it, but they're not doing anything to these paintings, and they're not letting people in to do anything, and because it's a political or psychological thing that we can do it, but they're not doing anything. So it's a bit problematic, but we're working. In September, the High Reincarnate Lama of Tabo Monastery will be in New York. His name is Sekong Rinpoche. When you look at the left side of the entrance, there's a foreword and a message to my book and also to the exhibition. And we're working together and we're trying to find solutions to this dilemma that somebody controls something but does not do anything to it. Okay, let's start with the iconography or philosophy again, so you understand what you see here, and then go into stylistic things which also count for the sculptures. Probably you've already seen that many of the images match style-wise what we have as sculptures there. The great thing is we don't know what we have here. So we won't be taking long to explain what it is. We know that these are, even if we have the names and the cartouches written up there, and those have been identified, we know that those can be attributable to the group of the 16 bodhisattvas, which is a theme in Tibetan Buddhism, or in Indian Buddhism, sorry. And the 16 Mahabodhisattvas, the great bodhisattvas, those occupy the lower register, the bodhisattvas on top. And those again are in four colors. Blue, another one would be for another of the four would be on that wall, coming into the circumambulation path, but they have been destroyed and we wouldn't bother to show them here. So blue, white, red, and green over there. it cannot be the same thing because white would certainly be reserved to Vairochana, and those might have been yellow, but they haven't done it like that. So it's a different system altogether. And you have to imagine it was a time when all these scriptures were translated. So probably there was a lot of enthusiasm about certain themes, certain programs, when they say, oh, we can also put that there. That sounds like something which is really incredible to follow and look up to. And the thing is, so far, a textual source for these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, for the Bodhisattvas, has not been found. I can express that to you best by certain attributes. We don't know what this is. This is like a dish with pearls, something like that. We know what a sword is. Manjushri is often connected to a sword. But you have to imagine that Tibetan Buddhism, iconography being unified, is a matter of the 17th century. This is 700 years before that. So this is, again, great, because here you have something which you don't find anywhere else in the world, which is unique, which maybe hasn't survived in the unification. But we know that from Christian religion also, they have these councils and they get together and what should we believe and what should we not believe. But here we have a concept or a theme and a program which didn't make it into the last set of Tibetan Buddhism, but which was highly individual and highly unique. Because sometimes I must say I'm really not getting bored, but from the 17th century on in Tibetan art, it's pretty much always the same way the deities are treated and are shown like that. So if you follow me over here, I have the best examples of strange attributes. This one here, oh, wait a minute. We have the name Mahabala is the name of the Bodhisattva here, the red one. He has like a rodent or a fox or something like that in his hand. There is no equivalent in modern or in later Tibetan Buddhism. We have Jambala, who is a protective deity, a deity of wealth, but coming from a total different background. He has a mungo in his hands who expels pearls, a bit like those Kirtimukhas. But this one appears to be actually really strangled or dead or something like that. He was held like that. So something which would not fit our idea of Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhism in general being very creature friendly. So I don't know what it is, and nobody knows so far. Maybe there are some secrets hidden in Tibetan monastery libraries that are still have to be revealed. Another thing would be this one. This is like a crystalline substance that is held in the hand, seems to grow out of his hands. It's not a dorje, not a vajra. It's something which is absolutely unique. Speaking of those attributes, that brings me to the last point, why it is so important to show this here, because this is some of the finest Buddhist art in existence. It is the only remains of Kashmiri painting. The only Kashmiri painting that we find apart from that is in manuscripts. Few miniature paintings have survived in Prajnaparamita manuscripts, for example, which had been decorated as a facilitation for the content. The iconography was there. But we have sculptures. If you go to the Met, they have this wonderful department with Kashmiri figures, which style-wise are absolutely akin to those. But no painting. Why? Because they were all destroyed. In Kashmir, which is in the lowlands of India, as compared to this region here on 3,500 meters height, it was all destroyed during the Islamic invasions. And we have only a few temples left over in Kashmir from that time, stone temples mainly. But the amazing thing was just in time, the artists, when probably Buddhism was also on the brink of not being adhered to much anymore, We know that it continued on to the 13th century, but it got less and less. And then the artists were, of course, happy to get work, although it was tough for them to go up to that height and stay in those desert surroundings. But they got good payment, and they were able to. And art historians firmly believe that these were also the same miniature painters that painted those paintings, because the finesse, the fine style, the detail that they apply to these images is unmatched. Like, take for instance this one. This has a great amount of shading applied to the body structure in order to create volume, to make what we had in the beginning there, this illusionary environment complete, that this is a real figure. Later on we have just flat figures like that, and less detail. Look at the deities, how the cloths had been designed. Then we have the Indian aspect, this one here. This hand is like snakes. The fingers are really, really finely designed, and all the muscles on the palms of our hands are seen. And those have not just been painted with a stripe of brush, but there are 2 or 3 hues of red in order to create fine lines like that. Take those energy rays. We could just make, show, because they're also ascending, by the way. This is again the pistil of the bud. And you can see here that there's a completely round halo. Normally when you have a sculpture, the halo is behind the lotus throne. But this one is again ascending. You have the whole halo surrounding the figure, and not being behind because the deity is seated. You could have just simply made a black thing, but they used blue and red. Same what they did with the shawls that encircle or dance around the deity by being pushed by some imaginary wind. This is like maybe the backside of the shawl, this is the front side, and it gets twisted around as in real life. So they tried to really create an atmosphere, possibly making the adepts understand it's reachable, you can do that. And also, of course, it's a paradise that is depicted here. What you can become, what you are. Jewelry is extraordinary rich. The crowns are individually designed. None of the crowns are alike. This one is a great one, but the more, please follow me as I did in Tabo. This is another one. We all of a sudden see a threefold crown, with garlands in between the tips. Then we have the typical Kashmiri coiffure, the hairstyle that they have. When you look at this, it's possibly done by a single hair brush that they applied in order to have the curls of the bodhisattva, the long hair that go until here of the bodhisattva. By the way, this has also an equivalent in real life. If a monk goes into long year meditation, he becomes an ascetic. His hair is growing long, beard is grown, because he's just into the state of meditation. So the bodhisattvas that attain Buddhahood are in this position of meditating for a long time. The jewelry, the hands again, this one, like these pearls look real to me. It's like they have been molded somehow. Another one that I really, really love is this one. Look. Okay. We see semi-precious stones put on the crown, and lots of them around them. Then the typical Buddhist thing of the rendition towards the princely state the Prince Sudhana came from, the princely background, where his jewelry was so heavy that his earlobes were, becoming long and elongated. This has been developed to the max here because they're so long that there's like a little piece of cloth that has been bound around or from the inside towards the outside. And this is not earring, this is the earlobe that is being bandaged by this band. Or look at this, like this. Yeah? And another thing, you don't have to move for that. You could see it in the book. We can get an idea about how what Kashmiri luxury textiles were in the 10th, 11th century from this one, because there's a figure, a sculpture in Tabo, which has exactly this dhoti on and painted like that. And we also find this rest of paintings also on the sculptures there, showing that what was en vogue, so to say, as a luxury textile in Tabo at the time. To finish off, this is the central part now of this circumambulation path. And of course, it's the Buddhas, because the Bodhisattvas are still striving. And these are the beings that have made it, so to say, that have been enlightened. And we originally had 7 Buddhas of the past, which is again a theme in Tibetan, in Mahayana Buddhism. Krakuchanda is one of them. This is the historic Buddha in teaching mode, again, like the Dharma Chakra mode, the one who is inheriting the cosmic knowledge that we find everywhere in this place, and that knows the path towards stepping out of the constant birth, rebirth cycle. Plus, we have the Buddha of the future, Maitreya, there. And here's another great thing about that, the last one that I'm going to tell you. He is actually wearing a Greco-Roman robe. It's like a Greek tunic that he is wearing. Why? Because Kashmir was the inheritor of Gandhara. Gandhara art is where Greek art met Buddhism. The story goes that Alexander the Great, Macedonian warlord, so to say, and king, came up to a region between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which became Gandhara. And this is the farthest point that he made it in his invasions and conquerings of land. And he brought the Apollo ideal with him to this region. And the people who were Buddhists at the time, until then, the Buddha was always portrayed either with his footprints or with the tree under which he became enlightened. And for the first time there, people started, this is like 3rd century before Christ, so 200 years after the Buddha lived, which was in the 6th century before Christ, they started to follow the urge that they want a representation, a portrait, so to say, of the Buddha. This is where these ideas developed of we call it an Ushnisha, which is an extension of the head. This is not an ascetic hairdo, but this is actually the enlightenment is so strong that the head has to expand. And we have even later on, we have deities that just represent this part, the enlightenment part of the head. So this came about, and they dressed their portraits in Greek robes. And why Kashmir became the one who inherited this? Because it got much of their styles from the Swat Valley, which is close to Gandhara in Afghanistan, and continued this tradition. And as I said, it kept the tradition of Buddhism alive, longest in India, together with Nalanda. Those are all in ruins. This is like the last place that is there where you can see, where you actually can see these things. You cannot see these things because it's pitch black when you go to the monastery. You have to go to New York to see them, or buy the book or whatever. I just think it's unique. It's something which should be on the UNESCO list of World Heritage Monuments. Political aspects prevent it so far, but I tried the same thing with Alchi Monastery, which was here represented for 2 years. It's difficult. UNESCO doesn't have any money. You have to have the Indian government to be protecting this monument and asking for the status of UNESCO. There's no support from them. But trying to get Indian governments to do something as a foreigner is very, as you can imagine, very, very difficult. But you never know. I mean, I'm in touch with a group that aims at preserving the place. It's a huge effort. It starts with draining the whole place because of climate change. There's more rain coming in, which, as you can see on this side of the sculpture, has already intruded into the monastery and washed away certain parts. After the buildings are safe, it would be cleaning, it would not be repainting, but just this reaction, this oxygen reaction with colors that we see here, terrible stains, those could be, you know, I've worked with conservers in the Himalayas before, and it's a tedious work. You take a Q-tip and you work for weeks getting this stuff off. Yeah? So it would be something which probably I would not see to be completed in my lifetime, but since we all believe in reincarnation, we will see it some other time. Thank you very much for coming and for joining me. And we hope you come back and bring more people interested and spread the Dharma through art like that. Thank you very much. petervanham.com. That's my website, and just Peter at Peter Van Ham.
Daniel Kitchen.
Wonderful meeting you. Thank you for coming again.